I knew the HOA had crossed a line when Deborah Hutchins showed up at my door with a clipboard. Two board members flanking her like bodyguards, demanding I hand over my custom window insulation system to share with the entire Meadowbrook Estates community. Let me back up a bit. My name is Oliver Jennings, and I bought my house in this Denver suburb about 3 years ago. When I moved in, the neighborhood seemed nice enough. Tree-lined streets, well-maintained lawns, that sort of thing. The HOA seemed relatively hands-off at first, just the usual reminders about trash can placement and lawn height regulations. I could live with that. The problem started last winter when my heating bills skyrocketed. Colorado winters are no joke, and my 1970s-era windows were about as energy efficient as leaving the front door wide open. I am talking about single-pane glass, drafty frames, the works. My December utility bill hit $400, and I knew something had to change. I spent weeks researching solutions. Professional window replacement would have cost me $15,000 minimum, money I did not have after putting everything into the down payment. So I got creative. I designed a custom insulation system using cellular shades, magnetic weather stripping, and these brilliant thermal curtains I found online. The whole setup cost me about $800 and took 3 weekends to install properly, but the results were incredible. My January bill dropped to $140. The system worked so well that I posted about it on the neighborhood Facebook group, thinking I would help out some neighbors dealing with the same problem. I shared photos, listed the materials, even offered to show anyone the installation process if they wanted to stop by. A few people messaged me thanking me for the tips. Some asked follow-up questions. Pretty standard neighborhood helpfulness. Then Deborah got involved. Deborah Hutchins had been HOA president for 7 years, and she ran Meadowbrook Estates like her personal fiefdom. Mid-50s, blonde bob that never moved in the wind, and an expression that suggested she perpetually smelled something unpleasant. She had opinions about everything from the exact shade of beige your house could be painted to whether decorative rocks counted as landscaping improvements requiring board approval. The knock came on a Saturday morning in early February. I opened the door to find Deborah standing there in her pressed khakis and HOA polo shirt, flanked by 2 board members I vaguely recognized from community meetings I usually avoided. Sharon something or other and Mark with the weird mustache. Oliver Jennings. Deborah asked, even though she obviously knew who I was. That would be me. "What can I do for you, Deborah?" She glanced at her clipboard. "We are here to discuss your recent social media post regarding window insulation modifications." I blinked. My Facebook post. About the curtains and weather stripping. The HOA board has reviewed your post and the photos you provided. We believe your insulation system represents a significant improvement to energy efficiency that should be shared with the entire community. "Okay," I said slowly. "That is why I posted about it. Anyone can buy the same materials and install them. I am happy to answer questions if people want help." Deborah's smile never reached her eyes. "We appreciate your willingness to help. However, the board has decided that the most equitable solution is for you to provide your insulation system to other homeowners on a rotating basis." I stared at her. "I am sorry, what?" "We propose a rotation schedule. Each household would receive your insulation system for 2 weeks during the coldest months. This ensures everyone benefits equally from your innovation. You want me to take down my window insulation and give it to my neighbors, the insulation I paid for and installed in my own house." "Exactly." Deborah beamed like I had finally understood a difficult concept. "We have already drawn up a schedule. Based on square footage calculations, Your system should adequately cover homes of similar size to yours. We will need you to remove the materials by next Saturday so the Hendersons can have them for their rotation period." Sharon nodded enthusiastically behind Deborah. Mark just stood there stroking his mustache like he was auditioning for a villain role in a silent film. "That is insane," I said flatly. "These are my belongings that I installed in my home. I am not taking them down to pass around the neighborhood like a library book." Deborah's expression hardened. "The HOA bylaws clearly state that any improvements or modifications that significantly benefit one homeowner should be made available to all residents when feasible. This falls under Section 12, subsection C, regarding community resource sharing. That section is about shared amenities like the pool and playground equipment. It has nothing to do with personal property inside my house. The board has interpreted it to include significant energy-saving modifications that create an inequitable advantage." I could not believe what I was hearing. An inequitable advantage. It is insulation. Anyone can buy the same stuff. Not everyone has your technical expertise or time to research and install such systems, Deborah countered. By refusing to share, you are creating a disparity in living conditions within our community. Some residents are struggling with heating costs while you benefit from significantly reduced expenses. Then maybe those residents should buy their own insulation, I said, feeling my patience wearing thin. I literally posted instructions on how to do it. Deborah made a note on her clipboard. "So you are refusing to comply with the board's request." "I am refusing to dismantle my property to hand it over to strangers, yes." "I see. Then I am afraid we will need to move forward with enforcement measures. You will receive a formal notice within 3 business days. Good morning, Mr. Jennings." They turned and walked away, leaving me standing in my doorway wondering what alternate reality I had just stepped into. The formal notice arrived via certified mail on Wednesday. It was 3 pages of legal-sounding nonsense that basically reiterated what Deborah had said, with added threats of fines starting at $100 per day if I did not comply by the following Saturday. They had attached a copy of Section 12, subsection C, which clearly referred to HOA-owned common property and had absolutely nothing to do with personal belongings. I called my buddy James, who happened to be a real estate attorney in Boulder. We had gone to college together, and he owed me a favor after I helped him move last year. "They want you to what?" James asked after I explained the situation. "Take down my window insulation and let it rotate through the neighborhood." That is the dumbest thing I have heard all week, and I had a client yesterday who wanted to sue his neighbor because their cat looked at him wrong. So I am not crazy. This is not actually something they can enforce. Oliver, they cannot make you share your personal property. That HOA bylaw they cited applies to community amenities, not stuff you bought and installed yourself. If they try to fine you, do not pay it. Let them take you to court. Any judge will laugh this out in about 5 minutes. That was reassuring, but I knew from stories I had heard that HOAs could make your life miserable even if they were in the wrong. They had time and resources, and a petty determination that could outlast most reasonable people. Saturday came and went. I did not remove my insulation. The following Monday, I found a bright orange violation notice stuck to my front door, informing me that I was now being fined $100 per day for non-compliance with HOA directives. I photographed the notice and emailed it to James, who sent back a formal letter to the HOA stating that their demand was legally baseless and that any fines issued would be challenged in court. He also pointed out that the HOA could be liable for harassment if they continued pursuing this ridiculous course of action. Deborah's response came 2 days later. The fines would continue, and furthermore, the board was now considering additional sanctions, including potential litigation to force compliance. She also mentioned that several community members had expressed support for the sharing program and felt I was being selfish. That last part stung more than I wanted to admit. I had always thought of myself as a decent neighbor. I helped old Mrs. Patterson with her groceries when I saw her struggling. I retrieved trash cans that blew into the street. I even volunteered at the neighborhood cleanup day last spring. And now, I was being painted as some kind of villain because I would not let strangers dismantle my house. The Facebook group exploded with opinions. Some people thought the HOA was overreaching. Others seemed to genuinely believe I should share my insulation system. One woman named Patricia left a long comment about how her heating bills were killing her budget, and how selfish people like me were ruining the community spirit of Meadowbrook Estates. I tried to respond calmly, pointing out again that anyone could buy the same materials I used. I had posted all the information. I was not hiding some secret technique. But the conversation just devolved into accusations and name-calling, so I muted the thread and tried to ignore it. The fines kept accumulating. $100 per day added up fast. After 2 weeks, the HOA claimed I owed them $1,400. I had no intention of paying, but seeing those numbers on the violation notices they kept leaving on my door was stressful. Then things escalated. I came home from work on a Wednesday in late February to find my front door slightly ajar. My stomach dropped. I pushed it open cautiously, half expecting to find the place ransacked by burglars. Instead, I found Deborah Hutchins standing in my living room with Sharon and 2 men I did not recognize. One of them was holding my thermal curtains, which had been removed from the windows. The other was taking down my cellular shades. "What the hell are you doing in my house?" I demanded, pulling out my phone. Deborah turned calmly. "The HOA board has authorized the collection of shared community resources. Since you refuse to comply voluntarily, we are exercising our authority to retrieve them. You broke into my house. We did not break anything." The HOA master key worked perfectly fine. My blood went cold. "You have a key to my house." All HOA boards maintain master keys for emergency access. It is standard practice. "Now, if you will excuse us, we need to finish collecting these materials so we can deliver them to the Hendersons before dinner." I was already dialing 911. "Do not move anything else. You are trespassing and this is theft." The 911 operator answered, and I explained the situation as clearly as I could while 4 people stood in my living room stealing my property. To her credit, the operator took me seriously and said officers were on their way. Deborah sighed dramatically. "This is unnecessary, Oliver. We are acting within our authority as the HOA board. You are stealing my stuff. That is not authority, that is crime. We prefer to think of it as community resource allocation. I prefer to think of you sitting in a jail cell, but I guess we will see what the police prefer." The officers arrived within 10 minutes. 2 Denver PD cops, one older guy who looked tired and one younger woman who seemed more alert. They took in the scene with professional neutrality. "Someone want to explain what is happening here?" the older cop asked. Everyone started talking at once. The cop held up his hand. "One at a time. Sir, you are the homeowner." "Yes, Oliver Jennings. I came home to find these people inside my house removing property I purchased and installed myself." "Madam, you are—" Deborah straightened her shoulders. "Deborah Hutchins, HOA president of Meadowbrook Estates. We are collecting community-shared resources as authorized by our governing bylaws. Did Mr. Jennings give you permission to enter his home? We used the HOA master key. It is standard procedure for emergency access. Is this an emergency? Deborah hesitated. It is a community equity matter. The younger officer was looking at the curtains and shades piled on my couch. What exactly are you collecting? Window insulation materials. Mr. Jennings installed an energy-efficient system that significantly reduces heating costs. The board has implemented a sharing rotation so all residents can benefit equally. Both cops looked at me, then back at Deborah, then at each other. The older one rubbed his forehead like he was getting a headache. Madam, did Mr. Jennings purchase these materials himself? Yes, but the benefit to the community requires shared access. That is not how property ownership works, the younger officer said. These are his belongings in his home. You cannot just take them. The HOA bylaws do not override basic property rights, the older cop interrupted. I am going to need you and your associates to put everything back exactly as you found it and leave the premises immediately. This is ridiculous, Sharon spoke up for the first time. The HOA has authority over community standards and equity. The HOA has authority over common areas and external property compliance, the cop said. You do not get to walk into someone's house and take their curtains. Now put them back. For a moment, I thought Deborah might actually argue further. Her face was bright red, and her jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscles working. But even she apparently recognized that arguing with police officers was a losing proposition. Fine, she bit out. This is not over, Mr. Jennings. The board will be pursuing legal action. You do that, I said, right after you reinstall everything exactly as it was. It took them 20 minutes to put everything back, and they did a terrible job. The curtains were hung crooked, and the shades were not properly aligned. After they finally left under the watchful eyes of the officers, I spent another hour fixing everything properly. The older cop lingered after the others had gone. You want to file charges. Breaking and entering, theft, trespassing, take your pick. I thought about it. Part of me wanted to throw the book at Deborah and her cronies, but I also knew that escalating things further might just drag this out longer. Can I decide later? I want to talk to my attorney first. Sure. You have got up to a year for misdemeanors, longer for anything else. But for what it is worth, I would document everything. Take photos. Keep all the notices they have sent. Get security cameras if you do not have them already. People like that do not stop just because they got told no once. He was right, of course. I thanked both officers and they left, but not before the younger one said, "For the record, your HOA president is absolutely insane. Good luck with that." I called James immediately and told him everything. He was silent for a long moment after I finished. They broke into your house and tried to steal your curtains, he said finally. Yep. Using an HOA master key. Apparently that is a thing. Oliver, this just graduated from annoying HOA overreach to actual criminal behavior. I know you do not want to drag this out, but you need to file charges. People like this do not learn unless there are real consequences. The cop said I have time to decide. You do, but I am telling you as your friend and your lawyer, file charges. Also, we are suing the HOA. Not just to get them to back off the fines, but for harassment, illegal entry, attempted theft, and emotional distress. I am going to bury them in paperwork. Is that not overkill? Oliver, they broke into your house. While you were not home, they could have done anything. What if you had a dog that got out? What if you had valuables they decided were also community resources? This is serious. He was right. I knew he was right. But the thought of months of legal battles was exhausting. Okay, I said. Do what you need to do. Good. I will draw up the complaint tonight. And for God's sake, change your locks. I do not care what the HOA bylaws say about master keys. They do not get access to your home anymore. I changed the locks the next day. A locksmith came out and installed new deadbolts on all the exterior doors, plus a chain lock for extra security. While he worked, I ordered security cameras online. If Deborah tried this again, I would have video evidence. The HOA sent me a violation notice for changing my locks without board approval. I sent back a copy of Colorado law stating that homeowners had the right to secure their property, and that HOA master key policies did not override that right. I also included a note mentioning that I was considering filing criminal charges for the break-in. James filed our lawsuit 3 days later. We were suing the HOA and Deborah personally for $10,000 in damages, plus legal fees and an injunction against further harassment. The complaint laid out everything: the absurd demand to share my insulation, the escalating fines, the illegal entry, the attempted theft. Deborah called me directly the day she was served, which my lawyer later told me was incredibly stupid of her. "You are destroying this community," she hissed when I answered. "Do you have any idea what this lawsuit will do to our budget? You should have thought of that before you broke into my house," I replied calmly. "We did not break in. We used authorized access." "Deborah, the police told you to your face that what you did was illegal. You are not the victim here. The other residents are going to hear about this. They will know you are the reason their HOA fees might go up to cover legal costs. The other residents can thank you for that when you are explaining why you thought stealing someone's curtains was a good use of HOA authority." She hung up on me. I probably should not have antagonized her, but I was past the point of trying to be diplomatic. The neighborhood Facebook group became a war zone. Deborah posted a long screed about how I was suing the HOA and potentially bankrupting the community over a simple sharing request. She painted herself as a champion of equality and me as a selfish monster who cared more about my property than my neighbor's well-being. Some people bought it. Patricia, the woman from earlier, posted multiple comments about how typical it was for privileged homeowners to use lawsuits to crush attempts at community solidarity. Someone else suggested I should just move if I did not want to be part of a cooperative neighborhood, but others pushed back. A guy named Tom pointed out that Deborah had literally broken into my house. Another woman, Jennifer, mentioned that she had bought her own window insulation materials based on my original post, and it had worked great, so she did not understand why anyone needed to borrow mine. Gradually, the tide of opinion started shifting. The real turning point came when someone obtained the police report from the break-in and posted it publicly. Suddenly, everyone could read the officer's statement that Deborah and the others had been inside my home without permission, removing my property. It was one thing to hear my version of events, but seeing it in an official police document made it real. A bunch of homeowners started asking questions. Why did the HOA board have master keys to everyone's homes? What other emergency access had they done without telling people? How much money had already been spent on legal fees fighting my refusal to hand over curtains? Deborah tried to do damage control at an emergency community meeting she called for mid-March. I almost did not go, but James convinced me it would be good to show my face and let people see I was not the villain Deborah was painting. The meeting was held at the community center, a nice facility with a big common room that usually hosted things like yoga classes and kids' birthday parties. When I walked in, the room was packed. Every chair was taken and people lined the walls. I found a spot near the back and tried to look inconspicuous. Deborah stood at the front with the rest of the board members. Sharon was there, and Mark with the mustache, plus two others whose names I could never remember. They all looked uncomfortable except Deborah, who had her fake smile plastered on. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," she began. "I know there has been a lot of confusion and misinformation spreading about recent HOA actions. I wanted to clear the air and explain what really happened." For the next 10 minutes, she spun a tale that barely resembled reality. According to Deborah, the board had simply tried to implement an innovative sharing program to help struggling neighbors. I had overreacted and called the police over a misunderstanding. Now, I was suing the HOA out of spite, potentially costing everyone thousands in increased fees. "Some people care more about their individual comfort than the community as a whole," she said, looking directly at me. "That is unfortunate, but the board will continue fighting for equity and fairness for all residents." A hand went up. It was Tom, the guy who had defended me online. "Deborah, did you or did you not enter Oliver's home without his permission?" "The HOA maintains master keys for emergency purposes, as outlined in the bylaws. Was there an emergency? There was a community need that required action." "That is not what I asked. Was there a fire, a flood, a gas leak, or any actual emergency?" Deborah's smile tightened. "The board determined that the ongoing inequity constituted an urgent situation." "So no," Tom said. "You broke into his house to take his curtains because he would not give them to you voluntarily." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Jennifer raised her hand. "I bought my own insulation materials based on Oliver's post. It cost me $600 and took a weekend to install. Why are we acting like this is some complicated thing that needs to be shared?" "Not everyone has $600 or the ability to do that installation," Deborah countered. "Then maybe the HOA should use some of our fees to help those people instead of spending money on lawsuits," someone else called out. The meeting devolved from there. More and more people started asking pointed questions. Why had the board not consulted the general membership before implementing a sharing program? Why had they not explored other options like bulk buying materials at a discount? Why were they doubling down instead of just admitting they had overstepped? Deborah tried to maintain control, but she was losing the room. Finally, a retired lawyer named George stood up. I had met him once at a block party, nice guy with a dry sense of humor. "Deborah, I have been reviewing the bylaws and the relevant Colorado statutes. The board's actions here are legally indefensible. You cannot compel a homeowner to share personal property. You cannot enter homes without genuine emergency justification. And you certainly cannot impose fines for refusing to comply with an illegal directive. If this goes to court, the HOA will lose badly. I strongly suggest the board drop all fines against Oliver, issue a formal apology, and hope he is willing to drop his lawsuit." "We have consulted with the HOA's attorney," Deborah said stiffly. "They have assured us our position is sound." "Then your attorney is either incompetent or has not told you the truth because they are billing hours. I am telling you, as someone who practiced real estate law for 30 years, you are going to lose." The meeting ended without any resolution, but I could tell the mood had shifted. People stopped me on the way out to apologize or offer support. Several asked if I really was planning to sue or if I would consider dropping it if the board backed down. "That is between me and my lawyer," I said diplomatically, but privately I was not sure anymore. James wanted blood, and I could not blame him. But most of the regular homeowners here seemed reasonable. It was really just Deborah and her loyal followers causing problems. A week later, I got my answer about whether the board would back down. They doubled the daily fines to $200 and sent me a notice that they were pursuing legal action to place a lien on my property for unpaid fees. James laughed when I forwarded him the email. They are making this so easy. Every one of these actions just adds to our case. Let them keep digging. Our court date was set for late April. In the meantime, the HOA drama continued to consume the neighborhood. A recall petition started circulating to remove Deborah and the board members who had participated in the break-in. It needed signatures from 30% of homeowners to trigger a vote, and from what I heard, they were well past that threshold within a week. Deborah sent out a mass email calling the recall effort a witch hunt orchestrated by malcontents who wanted to destroy community standards. That email prompted even more people to sign the petition. My security cameras, which had arrived and been installed, caught Deborah walking up to my house 3 different times over 2 weeks. She never knocked or left a notice. She just stood on my porch for a few minutes, looking at the door and windows, then left. It was creepy as hell. I sent the footage to James, who added stalking and harassment to our growing list of complaints. The lawsuit depositions were scheduled for early April. James was giddy with anticipation. I cannot wait to ask her under oath why she thought breaking into your house was legal, he told me over lunch. The mental gymnastics are going to be incredible. Deborah's deposition was apparently a disaster for the HOA's case. James could not tell me everything because of legal rules, but he said she had been combative, evasive, and at one point literally said that HOA board authority superseded normal property laws. The HOA's attorney had looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. My deposition was straightforward. I explained the timeline, provided all my documentation, and answered every question honestly. The HOA attorney tried to make it seem like I had been flaunting my energy savings in a way designed to make others feel bad, but even he seemed to realize how ridiculous that sounded. The recall vote was scheduled for the same week as our court date. The board tried to delay it, but the bylaws were clear about the process and timeline. If the recall succeeded, a new board would be elected immediately. I debated whether to run for a board position myself, but decided against it. I did not want that kind of ongoing drama in my life. I just wanted to live in my house with my insulation and be left alone. The court hearing was on a Tuesday morning. James and I showed up in business casual, as he had advised. Deborah arrived with the HOA's attorney, a harried-looking guy in an ill-fitting suit. The rest of the board members were there too, sitting in the gallery and trying to look supportive. The judge was a middle-aged woman with reading glasses and an expression that suggested she had seen every kind of nonsense humanity could produce. She reviewed the filings, asked a few clarifying questions, then looked at the HOA's attorney. "Counselor, can you explain to me the legal basis for your client's entry into Mr. Jennings' home?" The attorney cleared his throat. "Your Honor, the HOA bylaws provide for master key access in emergency situations." Was there an emergency? The board determined that the community inequity created by Mr. Jennings' refusal to share his energy-saving modifications constituted an urgent situation requiring intervention. The judge looked at him over her glasses. "That is not an emergency. That is not even close to an emergency." The board has broad discretion to interpret. The board has discretion over HOA common areas and external property compliance. They do not have discretion to enter a homeowner's private residence and remove personal property. That is called breaking and entering, Counselor. It is a crime. If I may, Your Honor, the HOA's position is that the modifications created an unfair advantage that violated the spirit of community equity standards. The spirit of community equity does not override the Fourth Amendment or basic property rights. Does your client understand that? The attorney glanced back at Deborah, who was sitting ramrod straight and radiating fury. The board firmly believes their actions were justified and within their authority. The judge sighed. Then the board is wrong. I am granting Mr. Jennings' request for an injunction, prohibiting any further harassment, fines, or contact regarding this matter. I am also awarding damages in the amount of $12,000, plus legal fees. The HOA will vacate all fines previously assessed and will issue a formal apology to be posted in all community communications. Do you understand? Your Honor, the HOA's budget cannot sustain. Then the HOA should not have broken into someone's house. Anything else? James stood. Your Honor, we would also ask the court to order the HOA to cease maintaining master keys to individual residences, as the board has demonstrated they cannot be trusted with that access. Granted. The HOA will return or destroy all master keys to individual homes within 30 days and will notify all residents that they are free to change their locks without penalty. This order is effective immediately. The gavel came down, and it was over. James was grinning like he had won the lottery. I just felt relieved and exhausted. Outside the courtroom, Deborah tried to confront me, but her attorney physically pulled her away while shaking his head. I heard her saying something about appeals, but the attorney seemed to be explaining that appealing would just cost more money they would lose. The recall vote happened that Thursday. Deborah and 3 other board members were removed by margins of over 70%. A new board was elected, including Tom and Jennifer and George, the retired lawyer. Their first act was to formally comply with the court order and issue a public apology. The apology was posted in the neighborhood Facebook group, emailed to all residents, and printed in the monthly HOA newsletter. It was brief and to the point. The previous board had overstepped their authority, violated Oliver Jennings' rights, and acted inappropriately. The new board would ensure nothing like that happened again. I also received a personal apology from the new board president, Tom. We met for coffee at a local shop, and he was genuinely apologetic about the whole situation. Most of us had no idea what Deborah was doing until it was too late, he said. She ran board meetings like they were top-secret government briefings. Half the time she would just send emails saying something had been decided without actually consulting anyone. I figured it was not all of you, I said. Sharon and Mark seemed pretty on board with the whole thing, though. Sharon is Deborah's sister-in-law, so that tracks. Mark just does whatever Deborah tells him. I think he is scared of her, but yeah, they all got recalled together. Good riddance. The HOA paid the damages and legal fees in installments over 3 months. James took his cut, and I ended up with a nice chunk that more than covered my stress and hassle. I used some of it to upgrade my home security system and donated the rest to a local charity that helped low-income families with weatherization projects. It seemed fitting. Deborah moved out of Meadowbrook Estates that summer. I heard through the neighborhood gossip that she and her husband bought a condo downtown, somewhere with no HOA. The irony was not lost on anyone. Sharon and her family left a few months later. Mark stayed, but he kept to himself and avoided eye contact whenever we passed on the street. I did not mind. The new board turned out to be great. They focused on actual community improvements like fixing the playground equipment and organizing neighborhood events. They also started a voluntary bulk buying program where interested homeowners could pool orders for things like weatherization materials to get better prices. Several families took advantage of it, and I heard the energy savings were significant. Life returned to normal, or as normal as it gets. I still had my window insulation, which continued to work brilliantly through the following winter. My heating bills stayed low and my house stayed comfortable. The whole experience taught me a lot about standing up for yourself even when it is uncomfortable. I had been tempted so many times to just give in, to hand over the stupid curtains and weather stripping to make the problem go away. But that would have set a precedent that the HOA could just take whatever they wanted if they made enough noise about community equity. Property rights matter. Personal boundaries matter. And sometimes you have to fight back against unreasonable people, even when it would be easier not to. I ran into Patricia once at the grocery store, the woman who had written those long comments about my selfishness. She looked embarrassed and tried to avoid me, but I caught her eye and nodded. She nodded back, and that was that. No need to rehash everything. George, the retired lawyer from the meeting, became a good friend. We started playing chess together on Tuesday evenings at his place. He told me more about the behind-the-scenes drama of the recall, including some pretty wild emails Deborah had sent trying to prevent the vote. Apparently, she had threatened to sue multiple people for defamation, none of which went anywhere. People like that do not handle losing power well, George said, moving his bishop to threaten my queen. She genuinely believed she was doing the right thing, making the community better. That is what made her so dangerous. True believers do not compromise. Do you think she ever realized how crazy the whole thing was? I asked, moving my queen to safety. Probably not. In her mind, she was fighting for fairness and you were the selfish villain. That is how people justify all kinds of terrible behavior. They convince themselves it is for the greater good. I thought about that a lot in the following months. How easy it was to rationalize bad actions when you convinced yourself you were serving a higher purpose. Deborah had probably felt completely justified breaking into my home, because in her worldview, community equity mattered more than individual property rights. The scary part was that she had found supporters. Not a majority, thankfully, but enough people had been willing to go along with her twisted logic. Patricia and others who thought I should just share my insulation because some neighbors were struggling. The impulse to tear down anyone who seemed to be doing better was powerful, even in a middle-class suburb where everyone had relatively comfortable lives. But most people were reasonable when they saw the facts. They understood the difference between helping your neighbors and being forced to surrender your property. They recognized that Deborah had crossed a serious line. That gave me hope. The following winter, my heating bills were even lower because I had added a few more improvements based on my research. I posted about them on the Facebook group, and this time there was no drama. Just people asking questions and thanking me for sharing the information. A few neighbors stopped by to see the setup in person, and I walked them through the installation process. That was what community was supposed to be. People helping each other voluntarily, sharing knowledge and resources when it made sense, respecting boundaries and property rights. Not forced redistribution enforced by a petty tyrant with a clipboard. One day in December, about 10 months after the whole mess had ended, I got a letter in the mail. It was from Deborah. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity got the better of me. The letter was short and handwritten. She did not apologize exactly, but she acknowledged that things had gotten out of hand. She said she had been under a lot of stress and may have pushed too hard on the sharing program. She hoped I was doing well and that there were no hard feelings. I read it twice, trying to figure out if it was genuine or if she was still trying to justify her actions. Probably a bit of both. I thought about responding but decided against it. Some things were better left alone. I filed the letter away with all the other documentation from that period. James had advised me to keep everything in case Deborah ever tried something again, though he doubted she would. The whole experience had been too public and too humiliating for her to risk a repeat. Life in Meadowbrook Estates continued peacefully. The new HOA board was responsive and reasonable. My windows kept the cold out and the heat in. My energy bills stayed manageable, and I never again had to worry about someone breaking into my house to steal my curtains in the name of community equity. Sometimes I thought about what would have happened if I had just given in at the start. If I had taken down my insulation and let it rotate through the neighborhood like Deborah wanted. It would have been easier in the short term, sure. No legal battles, no neighborhood drama, no stress. But it also would have established that the HOA could demand anything if they framed it as community benefit. Today it was insulation. Tomorrow it could be tools or furniture, or anything else someone decided should be shared. Where would it end? Standing up to unreasonable demands was not easy, but it was necessary. You had to draw lines and defend them, even when it cost you time and money and peace of mind. Otherwise, people like Deborah would just keep pushing, keep taking, keep justifying their overreach with appeals to fairness and equity. True fairness meant respecting everyone's rights, including property rights. True community meant people choosing to help each other, not being forced to surrender what was theirs. Those principles were worth fighting for. The irony was that my fight with the HOA probably helped more people than Deborah's sharing program ever would have. The publicity around the case made people aware of overreaching HOA boards. The new board's bulk buying program helped multiple families afford better insulation. And my willingness to share information freely meant dozens of neighbors improved their energy efficiency on their own. That was the lesson Deborah never learned. You cannot force people to be generous. You cannot mandate community spirit. Those things had to come from genuine care and mutual respect. As I sat in my living room on a cold January evening, warm and comfortable behind my custom insulation system, I felt grateful for how everything had turned out. The drama was over. The bad actors were gone. The community was healthier for having gone through the conflict and come out the other side with better leadership. And my heating bill for the month, $132, down $8 from the previous year thanks to my additional improvements. I never did share my insulation with the neighborhood on a rotating basis. But I did share something more valuable, the knowledge of how to solve the problem themselves. And in the end, that made all the difference. Tom stopped by one Saturday afternoon in late January to show me his own window insulation setup. He had used slightly different materials but the same basic principles, and he was thrilled with the results. My wife could not believe the difference, he said, admiring his handiwork. She kept walking around touching the windows to make sure they were closed because it did not feel drafty anymore. That is exactly what I noticed, I said. It is amazing how much those old single-pane windows leak heat. I told like 5 other people about this. The Hendersons are doing their house next month. I smiled at that. The Hendersons were the family who were supposed to get my insulation during the first rotation under Deborah's insane plan. Now they were buying their own materials and doing their own installation. That was how it should work. Let me know if anyone needs help with installation, I said. I am happy to answer questions or show them what I did. Will do. And hey, thanks for not backing down on all that HOA stuff. I know it was a pain, but it needed to happen. Deborah was getting out of control. After Tom left, I spent some time just enjoying the quiet warmth of my house. The wind was howling outside, typical for a Colorado winter day, but inside it was perfectly comfortable. My insulation system was doing its job, keeping the draft exactly where it belonged, outside. Sometimes I wondered if Deborah ever thought about the whole fiasco, if she ever had a moment of clarity where she realized how absurd it had been to demand someone share their curtains, if she ever felt embarrassed about breaking into a neighbor's house over window treatments. Probably not. People like that usually convinced themselves they had been right all along, that everyone else was the problem. But that was not my concern anymore. She was gone, living somewhere else, presumably finding new causes to champion and new battles to fight. Meadowbrook Estates was better without her. The community was more relaxed, more functional, more genuinely supportive. People helped each other because they wanted to, not because someone with a clipboard told them they had to. And me. I was just a guy who wanted to keep his house warm in the winter without spending a fortune on heating bills. I had found a solution, shared the information freely, and defended my right to keep what I had paid for. Nothing complicated, nothing heroic, just basic common sense and a willingness to stand up for what was right. The whole experience had taught me to be more aware of HOA rules and board actions. I started attending meetings regularly, not because I wanted to be super involved, but because oversight mattered. When no one was paying attention, people like Deborah could accumulate power and start making terrible decisions. The new board welcomed the increased attendance. Tom said it was one of the silver linings of the whole mess, that more homeowners were engaged and asking questions. Transparency and accountability made for better governance, even in something as small as a neighborhood HOA. I also learned to document everything. All those photos, emails, and notices I had kept ended up being crucial to the legal case. If I had just relied on memory or verbal accounts, it would have been much harder to prove what had happened. Now, I kept records of all HOA communications and important interactions, just in case. But mostly, life just went back to normal. I went to work, came home, did projects around the house. I hung out with friends and played chess with George and helped Mrs. Patterson with her groceries. The ordinary rhythms of life in a suburban neighborhood, without the drama of HOA presidents demanding communal ownership of window insulation. On particularly cold nights, when the temperature dropped below zero and the wind chill was brutal, I would sit by my insulated windows with a cup of coffee and think about how close I had come to giving in. How much easier it would have been to just hand over the curtains and weather stripping and avoid the whole fight. But then, I would remember the look on Deborah's face when she was standing in my living room, directing her helpers to take down my property like she had every right to be there. The entitlement, the absolute certainty that she knew better than everyone else, that her vision of community equity justified any action. No, I had made the right choice. Some battles were worth fighting, even when they were exhausting and expensive and stressful. Even when half the neighborhood thought you were being selfish. Even when it would have been so much easier to just give in, because it was never really about the insulation. It was about the principle that you do not get to take what is not yours, no matter how good your intentions are. It was about boundaries and rights and the line between helpful community spirit and authoritarian overreach. Deborah had crossed that line, and she had faced consequences. The system had worked, eventually. The courts had ruled correctly. The homeowners had removed the bad actors. Justice, in its slow and imperfect way, had prevailed. And through it all, my window insulation had kept doing its job, keeping the warmth in and the cold out. A simple solution to a common problem, installed by a homeowner who just wanted to reduce his heating bills. No sharing required. No rotation necessary. Just good insulation, properly installed in the house where it belonged. The draft stayed outside where it deserved to be, and inside, everything was warm and comfortable and mine.